weekend I led a 30-minute interactive session on Ayurveda that was part of an all-day yoga retreat. And what I focused on was Abhyanga and Marma, which are two elements of Ayurveda that I practice every single day. And what I want people to understand is that Ayurveda is really about well-being. It is the life science of India. It is also considered the sister to yoga, or the sister science to yoga, meaning hatha yoga. But to me, it is all about finding balance and having a balanced lifestyle. And what I mean by that is, I mean finding the balance that we too often don't have in our lives, whether it's because we're working 24/7 or we have to juggle between our children and our parents, or crazy work schedules, or whatever. All of those elements that are outside of us affect our inner balance. And there are a lot of beautiful practices within Ayurveda that I call the dinacharya. Dinacharya for me is a personal routine. You can look at it as it's more than your personal practice. It's about how you live life. And for me, my dinacharya, for example, is about waking up before the sun is out, and then I do my breath work, I do my hatha yoga. Before all that, I forgot to mention, before all that, I drink lemon ginger tea that I make with fresh ginger and fresh lemon. And my dinacharya ends when I go to sleep. And before I go to sleep is when I particularly practice Abhyanga and Marma. Those are the two areas that I wanted to talk a little bit more about today, because that, as I mentioned, is what we did in the interactive workshop that I led this weekend. And as I explained in my workshop, Marma is very similar to acupressure. It's all about finding different pressure points in your body, and we apply the pressure very similar to acupressure, but the different points mean different things. I do it before I go to bed. At the same time, sometimes in the middle of the day, if for whatever reason I feel I need to, I will do some Marma on me. I typically use my fingers or my knuckles for Marma, but there are what are called Marma sticks, and I have a little wooden stick which is beautiful, and you can use the Marma stick instead of your finger to apply pressure. I typically focus on my hands and my feet because I also have a certification in acupressure, and in the acupressure classes that I took, we focused on hands and feet. But Marma points are everywhere in the body. And I also like to do a few on the head point as well, such as the third eye is a really beautiful Marma point. Marma, basically, as I mentioned, is just about applying pressure to certain spots, and then I try to either repeat a mantra when I do it or focus on my breath and do deep breathing. And I also combine Marma a lot of times with Abhyanga, which is what I did in my workshop. Abhyanga is also sometimes called Sneha, S-N-E-H-A, and it is in English translated as self-massage. However, I wanted to read a little bit about what Abhyanga and the word Sneha means. Sneha means love, and something that I use in my handouts oftentimes talks about there is no greater expression of self-love than anointing ourselves from head to toe with warm oil. This practice is called Abhyanga, A daily Abhyanga practice restores the balance of the doshas and enhances well-being and longevity. The Sanskrit word sneha can be translated as both oil and love. It is believed that the effects of Abhyanga are similar to those received when one is saturated with love, like the experience of being loved. Abhyanga can give a deep feeling of stability and warmth. What I've been telling my students for ages is I'm not against professional massage therapy. I think professional massage therapy is great and I love it. But I also highly recommend doing Abhyanga yourself. It's free and it has so many benefits. Another thing I tell my students sometimes is just to kind of cross your arms and give yourself a little hug with your fingers. And as I do this, I just feel wonderful. Again, it's that little bit of self-love, but there are also pressure points, which I am touching. And all of your fingers are major pressure points. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, the shoulders are extremely important. From an Ayurvedic perspective, when we do Abhyanga, we focus on the joints. And from my knowledge as a certified yoga therapist and in Western medicine, the shoulders and the hips are the most complex of our joints. So we really need to take care of them. And again, just giving yourself a little bit of TLC on the shoulders is beautiful. But what I do with Abhyanga is I take my oil, and there are different types of oils that you should use depending on your dosha, which is why it is always best to first see an Ayurvedic practitioner or someone like me who is a yoga therapist, but I specialize a lot in Ayurveda. And I take my oil and I rub it in my hands, get it nice and warm. Sometimes people actually heat up the oil. I don't, because I live in Texas and I don't really use my air conditioning, so everything is hot in my house. So you build that warmth, and then you do circular motions around your joints. And again, I spend a lot of time on the shoulders and a lot of times on the hips. It can be harder to do the hips because your hand doesn't fit around your hip as nicely as it does around the shoulder, or even as nicely as it does around the elbow or around the wrist. But I focus a lot on the hips and also on the low back. And when I do the low back, I focus on where the kidneys and the adrenal glands are. Because to me, again, those spots are so important. The other thing that I want to mention is your fingers and your feet, or your fingers and your toes. But I mentioned that I do the Marma on the hands and the feet. And likewise, when I do my oil massage, I focus a lot on the hands, and every knuckle is a joint. Interestingly enough, in Marma, the concept of Marma is each one of your joints, of each one of your knuckles rather, corresponds to a different joint in your arm or your leg. So let's just say if I focus on my right index finger on, let's say this joint right here, then it's going to correlate to a certain joint in my arm or my leg. That is it. And thank you very much for joining me. Feel free to leave a comment below.